Reddit, what is the most mind-boggling fact you know? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. In World War II, a Hungarian mathematician named Abraham Wald developed a counterintuitive method for armor plate placement while studying damaged aircraft. He observed planes returning home from sorties with large holes in them and was tasked with figuring out where to put armor plates. His crucial insight was to not put armor plates where the holes were. The holes in the aircraft that returned represented damage that did not impact the ability of the planes to return home. In other words, he made the critical observation of the bias in the data he was observing. He was only looking at planes that survived. With this knowledge, he instructed armor to be placed in areas that were not damaged, because if these areas were hit, there would be no damage in that component in the planes that returned home. Story 2. The inscription on the One Ring from Lord of the Rings is not actually Elvish, which quite a few people mistake it to be, but an entirely different language that Tolkien created, called the Black Speech of Mordor, or Orcish. Tolkien has stated that he came up with the Black Speech by thinking of the most horrible things in his life, in particular his experiences from WW1, which is why when you hear the Black Speech, such as when Sauron speaks it in LOTR The Hobbit, it sounds like a dialect sent straight from hell. He grew to be disgusted by the language he created, so much that when a fan sent him a wine goblet with the One Ring's inscription on it as a gift, he used it as an ashtray. Story 3. Senator Daniel Inouye literally lived out every overdone action movie trope. Inouye was promoted to sergeant within his first year, and he was assigned as a platoon sergeant. He served in Italy in 1944 during the Rome-Arno campaign, before his regiment was transferred to the Vosges Mountains region of France, where he spent 2 weeks in the battle to relieve the Lost Battalion, a battalion of the 141st Infantry Regiment that was surrounded by German forces. He was promoted to second lieutenant for his actions there. At one point, while he was leading an attack, a shot struck him in the chest directly above his heart, but the bullet was stopped by the $2 silver he happened to have stacked in his shirt pocket. He continued to carry the coins throughout the war in his shirt pocket as good luck charms, until he lost them shortly before the battle in which he lost his arm. On April 21, 1945, Inouye was grievously wounded while leading an assault on a heavily defended ridge near San Terenzo in Tuscany, Italy, called the Colle Musatello. The ridge served as a strong point of the German fortifications known as the Gothic Line, the last and most unyielding line of German defensive works in Italy. As he led his platoon in a flanking maneuver, 3 German machine guns opened fire from covered positions 40 yards away, pinning his men to the ground. Inouye stood up to attack and was shot in the stomach. Ignoring his wound, he proceeded to attack and destroy the first machine gun nest with hand grenades and his Thompson submachine gun. When informed of the severity of his wound, he refused treatment and rallied his men for an attack on the second machine gun position, which he successfully destroyed before collapsing from blood loss. As his squad distracted the third machine gunner, Inouye crawled toward the final bunker, coming within 10 yards. As he raised himself up and cocked his arm to throw his last grenade, a German soldier inside the bunker fired a rifle grenade, which struck his right elbow, nearly severing most of his arm, and leaving his primed grenade reflexively clenched in a fist that suddenly didn't belong to me anymore. Inouye's horrified soldiers moved to his aid, but he shouted for them to keep back out of fear his severed fist would involuntarily relax and drop the grenade. While the German inside the bunker reloaded his rifle, Inouye pried the live grenade from his useless right hand and transferred it to his left. As the enemy soldier aimed his rifle at him, Inouye tossed the grenade into the bunker and destroyed it. He stumbled to his feet and continued forward, silencing the last German resistance with a one-handed burst from his Thompson before being wounded in the leg and tumbling unconscious to the bottom of the ridge. He awoke to see the worried men of his platoon hovering over him. His only comment before being carried away was to order them back to their positions, saying, "Nobody called off the war." The remainder of Inouye's mutilated right arm was later amputated at a field hospital without proper anesthesia, as he had been given too much morphine at an aid station, and it was feared any more would lower his blood pressure enough to eliminate him. This all from a first-generation Japanese-American that enlisted into a segregated division only after the U.S. lifted the ban on the Japanese serving in the military. Story 4. Cicadas live underground for several years and emerge only to reproduce. The number of years they take to come above ground is mostly a prime number, Each species has its own prime number of years they stay underground. The reason to be a prime number is that it reduces drastically the chance of two different species meeting above ground in the same year and crossbreed, weakening the genes of both species. Edit. As several people pointed out, crossbreeding might be actually good for the evolution on the long run. However, each species is already refining their genes for ages. If they crossbreed, they have to start over the whole process. Edit. Another reason for the weird reproduction cycle is avoiding predators and competition among species, according to some replies. Story 5. North American area codes were originally assigned based on population size and the ease of dialing on a rotary phone. 212 went to New York, fastest dial time possible for the most phoned area. 312 for Chicago. Alaska got 907. Mind you, this was when only 1 or 0 could be the middle digit in an area code. If you add up your area code with 0 being 10, you get a numerical ranking of your city-state's relative importance, if you will. This is no longer true, as any 3 numbers can be used for an area code. So these original area codes, like rotary phones, are a relic of the past. Edit. I had a couple area codes close, but incorrect. My apologies. Thanks for the comment corrections, folks. Story 6. Olympus Mons on Mars, the tallest known mountain in the solar system, is so large at its base that an observer on its peak wouldn't know he was standing on a mountain because its slope would be obscured by the curvature of the planet itself. Edit. Thanks for the gold kind, Reddit stranger. Story 7. That if sound waves could travel through space, the sun burning would sound as loud as a chainsaw at about 10 meters. Answer. You might be interested to know that NASA put out a collection entitled Symphonies of the Planets, in which they used electromagnetic recordings from Voyagers 1 and 2 to create each track. Granted, what you're hearing is a downsampling of electromagnetic waves that are normally well outside our ability to hear, but it's still really awesome. Edit. A couple people have asked me for a link to this. Here you go. Because gold. Edit. Thank you, kind soul. Story 8. There is microscopic organism called a tardigrade, also water bear, which can survive extreme environments, including the vacuum of space, by dehydrating its body and basically putting itself into stasis. Then, when conditions improve, it absorbs some water and goes back to doing whatever it does. Story 9. Male Irish mummies are often found with nipple mutilations, leading many experts to believe Irish leaders may have wore nipple rings, as kissing a king's nipple was believed to be a sign of respect. Story 10. A supernova seen from the distance the sun is to the earth will be brighter, in terms of energy delivered to your retina, than a hydrogen bomb pressed against your eyeball, by 9 orders of magnitude. Story 11. From the time that it was discovered, 1930, to the time that it was declassified as a planet, 2006, Pluto made less than a third of a full revolution around the sun. Story 12. Quartz landed in South America or the New World and spread diseases that after 80 years eliminate 21 million natives. 21 million people in 80 years. That's 262,500 people dying annually. 730 people dying daily and 30 people hourly for 80 years straight. Story 13. We have only explored 5 of the ocean, which covers 70 of our Earth. Edited to add. I learned this in an Earth Science college course last spring, so that's my own personal source. But here's a website that briefly explains it. Story 14. That in World War II, an American airman by the name of Alan McGee survived a free fall from 22,000 feet without a parachute and becoming a prisoner of war for 2 years. In 1943, he was in a B-17 making a bombing run over France when plane's wing was shot off by German fighters. As the plane entered a spin, he leapt out without a parachute and immediately lost consciousness from the altitude. After falling 4 miles, he crashed through the glass ceiling of the Saint Nazaire railroad station and onto the floor below, where he was captured as a prisoner of war. He suffered almost 30 shrapnel wounds, several broken bones, severe damage to his nose, eyes, lungs, kidneys, and his right arm was nearly severed off. His captors treated him back to health. He was liberated in 1945 and awarded an Air Medal and a Purple Heart. Edit. Grammar. Story 15. Eels actually have 2 jaws, the first being like a normal jaw, the second being hidden in their throat. The secondary jaw lunges forward when the eel bites down on prey, bites down on the piece within the mouth, and bites a chunk out of it, pulling it down the throat. Think about the alien in the movie Alien. The secondary mini-mouth they use is based off an eel's anatomy. Edit. Thanks for my highest rated comment ever, Smiley. Story 16. The fact that recently a group of scientists went to investigate a forest of trees that were able to live for thousands of years on their own and ended up finding traces of massive radiation in the very early rings of the trunks. All of them had this in the same spots. Around the same time, judging by the average age of the trees in the rings the radiation was located in, there was a battle involving the Crusaders. Deus Vult, by the way, and one of the soldiers' uncovered diaries had described seeing the image of the cross burning like fire in the sky, which had given them extra morale, and then they won the battle. So, using logic, you can guess that this cross in the sky was what caused the radiation. And I can hear you thinking, how in the fudge? Well, I can proudly tell you that literally no one knows. Story 17. That humans almost went extinct 75,000 years ago. Total population dropping to around 15,000, destroying much of our genetic diversity. Story 18. Betelgeuse is the 31st biggest star we know of in the universe. It is so big that if you replaced our sun and put Betelgeuse in its spot, Betelgeuse would almost reach Jupiter's orbit. Story 19. There is more bacteria living inside a single person's digestive system than the number of human beings who have ever existed in history. Story 20. The swimming pool on board the Titanic is still full. Edit. Well, holy crap. My first gold and on a dad joke as well. Thanks, kind stranger. Story 21. School buses used to be orange before they changed them to yellow for visibility. U.S. Coast Guard helicopters used to be yellow before they changed them to orange for visibility. Story 22. If you were being sucked into a black hole and could somehow stop, turn around and look back out into space, you could see the whole fate of the universe play out before your eyes due to time dilation. You could watch the birth and passing of stars in the blink of an eye. It would be quite a light show. Story 23. If you count how many times a cricket chirps in 15 seconds and add 37, you get the temperature in Fahrenheit. Story 24. No one ant knows how an ant colony works, yet an ant colony emerges from many ants. Each single ant is following its basics, impulses, and reflexes based on its immediate surroundings. And yet the colony can react to intruders, build more tunnels, and gather food as if it were one large entity. It's a commonly known fact, but I think it's pretty mind-boggling when you think about it. Edit. What's even more mind-boggling is if you use this to think about your brain. Your neurons are the ants, and your brain is the ant colony. Each neuron can receive electrical input from any number of other neurons firing. If the amount of input crosses a threshold, unique to each neuron, it itself fires. This electrical impulse then travels to any number of other neurons, and the same process occurs in each of them. This is how your brain works. From this simple process emerges complex thought. You are not the neurons in your brain. You are the extremely complex colony of neurons that emerges. Each neuron is utterly meaningless, but from this meaninglessness forms meaning. All the amazing things your brain can do. Edit 2. For further reading, I recommend Gödel Escherbach, An Eternal Golden Braid, Chapter 11, by Douglas Hofstadter, and the preceding section, Ant Fugue. Answer. You forgot that there are ant species that are heavily into farming. Not only mushrooms below ground in special chambers, but also lice as cattle or harvesting plants. Some put natural disinfectants at the entrance to their colonies to ward off sickness. And the architecture of some colonies can go 5 meters deep below ground with perfect ventilation, keeping appropriate temperatures in all rooms. Story 25. As of 4 years ago, vacant homes in the U.S. outnumber the homeless 22 to 1. Sources. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, in January 2012, there were 633,782 homeless in the U.S. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2013, there were 14.2 million homes that were vacant year-round. Story 26. The McDonald's coffee lawsuit. The woman wasn't the one driving. The car was parked. She was in her late 70s. She sustained third-degree burns. The coffee melted her clothing and skin, which fused her legs together and her labia shut. She went into shock and nearly died. McDonald's had received hundreds of burn complaints already from serving their coffee at near boiling. They offered the lady $800. After 20 years of imagining some dummy scalding herself while driving, this was pretty mind-boggling. Answer. Also, McDonald's had a huge list of people who had similarly complained about the coffee temperature, receiving burns but refused to change the brew temp. The family had originally requested money only to cover her medical expenses, but the jury decided on the original high amount to set precedent that large companies can't ignore the consequences of their actions. Story 27. That despite what they might have you believe, literally no one has ever had their mind blown by a BuzzFeed article. Story 28. The longest piece of literature in the English language is 3.5 million words long and counting, is written by a 21-year-old guy in Arizona and is a fan fiction of Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Edit. Apparently now it has over 4 million words. Answer. Undocumented features. A multi-author crossover anime-SF fanfic series that started in 1991 weighs in at over 4 million words. It's a truly massive crossover, drawing on sources ranging from Bubblegum Crisis, Dirty Pair, and Macross to Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5, and Mass Effect, by way of Revolutionary Girl Utena, Hellboy, Magic Knights Rayearth, Doctor Who, Invader Zim, and Darkwing Duck. For comparison, two of the better-known single works of long web fiction, Andrew Hussey's Homestuck and Eliza Yudkowsky's Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, are around 810,000 words and 650,000 words respectively, although Homestuck also includes comic panels and a few hours of animation. Story 29. Giraffes and humans possess the same amount of neck bones. The same. Edit. The next person to suggest I use number in place of amount gets a shiny sticker. Story 30. In the 50s, when it was still okay to smoke in a courthouse, a lawyer might put a wire in his cigarette. That way, if the defense was really taking it to you, the jury would get distracted by your magical cigarette that never ashes. Case closed. Story 31. Astronomer here. The most powerful magnetic fields in the universe are from magnetars, which are neutron stars with crazy magnetic fields. How crazy? Well, on Earth, your typical magnet has a strength of about 1.25 Tesla. A magnetar will have 10,010 Tesla. This is so strong that the magnetic field would literally eliminate you if you get within 1,000 kilometers of the magnetar by distorting the electrons in your body too much. Even more interesting, while there are some theories out there, no one really knows why these souped-up magnetic fields exist at all. Neutron stars have tons of mysteries. Edit. Lots of people are asking what exactly happens to you. Basically, all the electrons in the atoms in your body would be stripped away, so all the molecules would break apart. So you'd be ionized into a whiff of plasma, basically. Story 32. The random events, the accidents, and the conscious decisions that took place just to get me here. I just think of my own life and how I would have a totally different wife and kids if my dad didn't take XX job in XX city, or if my parents didn't get divorced, or of course me not even being here at all, if they didn't have intimacy that night I was conceived, etc. What if mom had a headache that night, or dad said something wrong at dinner, or what if he did and it was the make-up intimacy that really got me here? Then multiply all those possibilities times each preceding generation and thousands of years of ancestry and humanity. Shoot, each one of us is a miracle resulting from a combination of events whose odds I can't even fathom. Answer. I met my now girlfriend 17 years ago, in a bar, in a city, nowhere near where either of us were born, in a video game, by random chance. Had I not signed on that day, or at that time, we could have never met. She only bought the video game because she was trying it at a friend's house and met this funny guy in a bar. She happened to have the foresight to write down my character's name, keep that scrap of paper, and remember to look me up when she bought it a month or so later. She was only 11. I was 15. We became and stayed friends. Never met in real life. Had different boyfriends and girlfriends over the years. I got married, had kids. She got engaged. We only ever said hi on holidays or birthdays on Facebook. I got divorced, was sad and alone, and saw a picture she posted on Facebook of her looking so grown up. I always just thought of her as a kid. So I commented and said how grown up she was. She messaged me and I found out her engagement was off. We started talking. I drove 1,400 miles to finally meet her in real life. And then she moved 1,400 miles to be with me. Here we are, 2.5 years later, and my life has never been more complete. The universe is fudge crazy. To think a little game called EverQuest would impact my life so drastically 17 years later. Edit. People are getting confused. I'm sure it's because of the way I told it. The bar was in the game, EverQuest, in a town called Freeport. I was sitting there camping a bard who gave me easy EXP. This low-level half-elf walked in and wanted to know why I was doing it. I told her it was fun and an easy way for me to level up. That's how we met in a bar at such a young age. Edit 2. I'm really appreciating all of the responses and similar stories. This memory has sparked my nostalgia buzz, and she and I are going to get into some EverQuest tonight and go take down everything in the hole with our alts. I even resubscribed to Daybreak All Access. Gonna be fun. Story 33. In considering the creation of the universe, either there was nothing and then there was something, or there has always been something. Both of those are impossible, but one of them is true. Story 34. All the planets in our solar system, if places placed side by side, can fit in between the Earth and the Moon. Story 35. On a logarithmic scale, a grain of silt is the exact middle ground between the Planck length, shortest length possible, and the diameter of the observable universe. Edit. Guys, I have no scientific knowledge on the topic. I dislike to disappoint you, but it is just a thing I read in a Reddit comment a few weeks back. But it is something that blows my mind every time I think about it. Story 36. That if you're late to work in the Army, they can dock a week's pay, put you under 2 weeks house arrest, and make you cut the grass with scissors during that time. Source: me, who did all that. Story 37. The fact that no matter what, there are always at least 2 points directly opposite each other on the globe that have the exact same pressure and temperature in the same time. Good Vsauce ep, but this starts around 10 minutes. Story 38. Despite what you see on the news, we are actually living in the safest time in all of human history. Answer. Cracked actually has a really good podcast episode about this. The enormous lie about modern life you likely believe. It goes really in depth on how the world is better in all of these amazing ways that occur in such slow burns that the media never really picks up on them, so most people are unaware. Edit. Here's the episode. It's long but well worth it. Story 39. I have another one. It's not exactly mind-boggling, but it's still really interesting. I love the big cats. The term panther is traditionally thought to refer to black jaguars, or more traditionally, black leopards. Bagheera from The Jungle Book is probably the best-known black panther. However, the term panther can be used to refer to any of the 5 species of cat in the genus Panthera. The lion, tiger, leopard, snow leopard, and jaguar are all panthers in this respect. The 5 species are also commonly called big cats, an informal classification which also includes cheetahs and cougars in popular vernacular. Clouded leopards are occasionally grouped in here as well. Panther, as a colloquial term, can also refer to cougars, the large tawny cat of North and South America. Panther is a term most commonly associated with melanism. Melanism refers to an abundance of pigmentation and is the opposite of albinism. Classic example of melanism include the black leopard and black jaguar. There have been very few reports of black lions or black tigers, but as far as I know, they've never been confirmed. What have been confirmed are pseudo-melanistic tigers, which have a more heavily striped coat. Conversely, the golden tabby tiger has been observed. As the name suggests, it has no dark stripes. It should also be noted that while the pseudo-melanistic tiger has been observed in the wild, the golden tabby tiger is strictly a captive beast, having been bred accidentally from white tigers. Despite many sightings, there has never been an authenticated account of a pure black melanistic cougar. That said, native tribes of Mexico and the southwestern United States and Spanish explorers told of onza. Similar to the mountain lion, it was said to be slimmer, and some specimens had pale brown stripes on their legs, and most intriguingly, had non-retractable claws. It was also said to be ferocious, capable of taking down fully armored conquistadors in broad daylight. A cat was shot in 1986, matching the description of the onza, and was found to be a mountain lion. so Anza appears to be a sufficiently rare mutation of mountain lion. For what it's worth, cheetahs are among the only members of the cat family that have non-retractable claws, and they are the species most closely related to mountain lions. Several cryptozoologists hypothesize that the Anza had been a relic of the American cheetah, which lived during the Ice Age. As previously mentioned, melanism is the opposite of albinism. While there have been a handful of albino individuals among the Panthera species, the white tigers and white lions are more well known. White tigers and lions are not albinos. They have the condition leucism. These mutations are similar in effect to albinism, but are caused by different genes, and leucistic individuals retain some melanin. White tigers have chocolate brown stripes and blue eyes, compared to the red eyes characteristic of albino individuals. So-called stripeless white tigers have been reported. White lions have a broader range of color, appearing anywhere from blonde to white. Finally, there is the king cheetah. Similar to the pseudo-melanistic tiger, king cheetahs have a majestic coat that features bars and stripes as opposed to the polka dot pattern characteristic of cheetahs. When originally discovered, they were believed to be hybrids of leopards and cheetahs. Conversely, there exists a single known specimen of a spotless cheetah. While it is popularly assumed that only lions live in groups, this is not strictly true. While most cats are indeed solitary, male cheetahs have been seen to form small groups of 2 or 3, occasionally more. Called coalitions, these groups tend to be made up of brothers of the same litter, but some coalitions include cousins or even unrelated members. As cheetahs are among the weakest of the top African predators, yielding their eliminate to lions, leopards, hyenas, and even Cape hunting dogs and baboons, hunting in coalitions allows them to take down larger prey. Very recently, in the first photographic evidence of its kind, game cameras in Siberia captured a male Amur tiger assisting the female in raising the cubs. Occasional reports of male Bengal tigers raising orphan cubs, and there have been unauthenticated reports of male leopards staying with their cubs from the Congo as well. Story 4. The Eden Project, Cornwall, UK, have some massive biomes, which house a vast array of plants. These things are huge. One of them is 55 meters, 180 feet high, 100 meters, 328 feet wide, and 200 meters, 656 feet long. The architecture of these biomes are the source of one of my favorite facts. Each dome has what's known as a hex-tree-hex space frame with 2 layers. The outer layer is made of hexagons. The largest is 11 meters across, plus the odd pentagon. The inner layer comprises hexagons and triangles bolted together. The steelwork weighs only slightly more than the air contained by the biomes. Story 41. If you believe that you're truly one in a million, there are still approximately 7,184 more people out there just like you. Story 42. Humans have about a quarter-second response time to visual stimulus. We experience the world with a 250 milliseconds ping. Story 43. The Monty Hall problem. Basically, if there's a prize behind one of 3 doors and you choose one at random, you have a 33% chance of being right. No problem, right? But if one of the 2 remaining choices is then taken away, you can increase your chance of winning from 33 to 66 by choosing to switch to the other door. If you stick with your original choice, your chance of winning is still 33. Story 44. A polar bear liver contains so much vitamin A, if you ate one, you would overdose on vitamin A and die. Story 45. Cleopatra lived closer to today than to the time the pyramids were built. Also, Oxford University was founded before the Aztec Empire. Story 46. In a room with just 70 people, there is a 99.9% chance that 2 of them share the same birthday, day of the year. This is known as the birthday problem. At 367 people, the probability is essentially 100. Story 47. Countries that are the 5 biggest arms manufacturers and exporters are all permanent members on the UN Security Council. Story 48. The most successful sniper in the history of Western civilization was likely Simo Hai of Finland. During the Winter War of 1939-1940, when the Russians invaded, Hai set himself up in a tree in below freezing temperatures, -4 FH to -40 FH, armed with only 2 weapons, possibly a M2830 rifle and a Suomi KP31 submachine gun. And then he started eliminating Russians. Lots and lots of Russians. Edit. Just learned that on one particular day, HYH recorded 25 eliminate. When the Russians realized that this one sniper was picking them off, they set counter-snipers to eliminate him. HYH eliminate them all. So the Russians sent artillery strikes, and those didn't work either. After eliminating an average of 5 Russians a day for over 3 months, High was finally stopped when a Russian soldier that he shot and eliminated at the same time managed to get off a shot with an explosive bullet that struck him in the jaw. At the end of his career, Haiha had 505 confirmed eliminate and is estimated to have eliminated at least 300 more soldiers. Oh, and that explosive bullet didn't actually eliminate him. Haiha survived and later became a successful dog breeder and moose hunter. Edit 2. Hi, not Haiha. Also, this is my new top comment, and my inbox died. Edit 3. Okay, it has come to my attention that at least some of the above is the embellishment of the story over time. Rask Historians has some interesting posts on what really happened. Edit 4. Ignore Edit 3. Story 49. When you look at the night sky, pick out a specific dim star and look at it. The fact that you can see it means that a few million years ago, a few million miles away, that star emitted a photon. That photon traveled the cold vacuum of space for millions of miles, narrowly avoiding all other objects, for millions of years before you were born, continued into our solar system while you aged, reached our atmosphere, and finally, right when you walked outside and looked up at the sky, made contact with your eyeball. Edit. Since this post is getting a lot of feedback, I'll clarify a few things. Saying millions of miles is incorrect. The nearest visible star with the naked eye is Sirius, which is 8.611 light-years away. That is over 50 trillion miles away. That means that light emitted from that star would take 2.5 billion years to reach Earth. I'm going to leave my error in my original comment to encourage further discussion on doing proper mathematics when considering orders of magnitude. Second edit. Wow, I'm unable to math today. Thanks for all the replies pointing out my mistakes in my edit. Please remember to check the replies before pointing out the exact same thing, since I've gotten about 100 replies stating that it would take 8.6 years for a photon to travel 8.6 Li. You're all correct. Story 50. Goods being transported in a car is called shipment, but when transported in a ship, they are called cargo. Story 51. Dark matter isn't inert. It interacts with other dark matter. This means there could be dark atoms, dark molecules, dark planets, dark people. Over 90 of the universe is not observable. Story 52. Pneumano-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis is a lung disease you can get from breathing in volcanic ash. It's also the longest word in the English language. Answer: not really though. It's a matter of debate. Longest word in a major dictionary. But the fact that a word for this condition already existed, silicosis, and that this word was invented by the National Puzzlers League for use in one of their puzzles, give this the distinction of being an artificial word. I mean, they're all made up, so take your pick. I like floxa nasa nihilolipilification for longest real word, because you might participate in it when you find out what it means. Story 53. Voyager 1 has been traveling at a rough speed of 38,000 miles per hour. That's 17 kilometers or 11 MIs per second. The darn thing does a marathon in under 3 seconds and has been traveling in space since shortly after the first Star Wars movie came out in 1977. In the past 50 years, at this incredible speed, I know it likely varied in speed on some of its initial journey. Assuming a rough estimate, it has made it to a distance of about 18.8 billion kilometers, 11.7 billion miles, away from Earth. That's about 69,118 AU, astronomical units. Seems like a lot, right? It's only 0.001 light-years of distance traveled. Now imagine 1 light-year. Just think about how far something would travel in a whole year at the speed of light. The closest star, besides the Sun, is 4.22 light-years away. This is why we don't have aliens landing in our backyard and never will. Edit. Had my AUs converted wrong. Story 54. The cashew is a handle to a fruit called a marion, pronounced like lasagna, maragnon. It is sweet and much like the consistency of a really fibrous peach. Here is a good picture. The shell in which the cashew comes is toxic if eaten, but it is an ergonomically perfect natural handle for the fruit. Story 55. Human female breasts are much bigger and curvier than animal breasts because of the evolution of the human nose. As the nose developed in Homo sapiens and previous species, the breast needed to be bigger and branch further out the chest, so that the baby infant could actually manage to suck on the nipple. Story 56. So the sun is pretty big, right? It'd take 1.3 million Earths to fill up the sun. But there are black holes that are 30 billion times the size mass of the sun. Watt. Edit. Equated size with mass. And to think I want to be a theoretical astrophysicist, I should just drop out now. Story 57. Atrazine. In water. Feminizes frogs. By feminization, I mean that they can reproduce with other male frogs and have normal offspring. Story 58. The United States has more aircraft carriers than every other country combined. The United States has the biggest and second biggest air force in the world. If you took the United States military funding and cut it in half, it would still be the largest military spending in the world. America likes guns. Story 59. The sun's core is so hot that a piece of it the size of a pinhead would give off enough heat to eliminate a person 99 miles away. Yet the surface of the sun is only 5,500 Celsius. The next layer, the chromosphere, is only 4,500 Celsius. Yet as it goes further out to the corona, it jumps to 2 million C. Story 60. The closest large galaxy to our own is the Andromeda Galaxy, which contains more than 1 trillion stars. When you think about it, it just seems like a number. So here's a bit of edit, closest large galaxy, not closest. Story 61. That there are people in North Korea who are living in concentration camps, whose parents were born in those camps, who will have children that will never know the outside world either. Story 62. There is a finite number of particles, energy, and volume in our universe. If there is a finite number of variables, particles, their positions, and their movements, then the universe is computable, as in, the entire thing can be recreated in a computer, given a powerful enough computer, which means our reality could be a computer simulation. Strange thing is, the laws of physics as we know them support this theory. Quantum mechanics say particles don't exist until they are observed. You don't render elements that aren't visible in a game. We also have pixels in the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of length, and we have a clock speed in Planck time. Like Planck length, it is the smallest unit of time. So we actually know the clock speed and the resolution of our universe, which only processes data that is being actively used, just like you would expect in a computer simulation. Story 63. Alternate personalities can be so profoundly powerful that for the sufferer, separate personalities can have different eyeglass prescriptions. Story 64. One of the most successful pirates in history was a Chinese adult worker. Edit. Geez, guys, it was this lady. Story 65. There was a bomber regiment during World War II that flew junker planes that often crapped out on them midway through. So these pilots would glide silently over their target, drop their payload, then climb out onto the wing to manually restart the engine to finish the flight home. Did I mention the pilots were all women? Because of this and their silent approach, they were referred to as night witches. Answer. I've seen this everywhere. And while it's based in truth, it's not as dramatic as you say. Yes, the pilots were women. Yes, they flew older, junker planes. No, they did not climb out on the wing to restart their engines. They flew single-engine biplanes, which means the engine was on the nose. Hence, climbing out on the wing would do them no good. And they didn't shut their engines down to glide. They just idled them. It was and still is a very common technique for descending landing in a small aircraft. Don't get me wrong, though. Those ladies were still badasses. Source, am a pilot aviation nerd. Also this, Story 60. 6. A 45-year-old Bosnian man named Amir Vahabovic faked his passing back in 2007 because he wanted to see who would attend his funeral. Only his mother attended. After this debacle, he wrote dozens of angry letters to his so-called friends and what he thought of their friendship going forward. Answer. My former neighbor faked his funeral too, back in the 80s or 90s. I wasn't there, but his nephew proudly showed me the framed newspaper article. He had just been diagnosed with cancer and knew he had very little time left and wanted to experience his own funeral. Bought the casket, got inside with sunglasses on, laid there and watched his friends and family give eulogies. It looked like people had fun with it, lots of smiles. He didn't fake being dead. He just wanted to have a going-away party, I guess. His nephew told me quite a few people who showed up after hearing it was his funeral were pretty shocked to see him, not dead. Story 67. The amount of ways to arrange a deck of cards is 52. That means that if you shuffle a deck of cards, you are very likely to be the first person to shuffle it in that order ever. How much is 52? Imagine standing on the equator and every minute taking a step forward. Once you finish a lap, you take a drop out of the ocean and start again. Once you've taken all the water on Earth, you lay a piece of paper on the ground and refill all the oceans and start again. You continue stacking paper like that. By the time the stack of paper reaches the sun, the amount of seconds that pass since you started is still many order of magnitude away from 52. Story 68. The biggest tire manufacturer in the world is Lego. In 2006, the Lego Group produced 15 billion individual pieces of Lego, which included 306 million tires. By 2011, Lego's annual production was increased to 381 million, more than twice as many as any of the other tire companies, including Bridgestone, Michelin, and Goodyear. Story 69. The Romans sent Latin and math teachers to Japan long before a way to travel quickly via sea or land, some 1,000 years before the Europeans started trading routinely with the East. Also, at its height, Roman engineers were about 2 steps away from a steam engine and had early designs for tracks to lay over their roads. Story 70. There was a molasses flood in Boston that eliminated about 25 people. Corners were cut when building a molasses container at the top of a hill, and when it burst, there were waves of molasses drowning people in the streets. They say on hot days you can still smell the molasses. Story 71. People are freaked out about herbicides like glyphosate in their food when they are relatively harmless by all accounts. The real culprit are compounds called surfactants, which are added to herbicide formulations, which are often incredibly toxic and unregulated. The surfactant used in Roundup creates a solution which is hundreds of times more toxic than glyphosate alone. The kicker? There are plenty of safer surfactants out there, which have been shown to be nearly as effective as within 5, which is within the margin or error for these kinds of measurements, the one found in Roundup. Story 72. If 2 supermassive black holes colloid and merge, one of 36 and one of 29 times the weight of the sun, you end up with a single black hole 62 times the mass of the sun, with the remaining 3 solar masses converted to energy. The mind-boggling bit is this. That's 3 times the weight of the sun, being the m in EMC2. The m is mass in kilograms. The c is the speed of light in meters per second, squared. The e is energy in joules. 1 joule will heat a kilogram of water, which is how much 1 liter weighs, by 1 degree Celsius. If it does it in 1 second, the reaction uses 1 watt of energy. The merging takes about 13 of a second. Story 73. Because of the double-slit experiment, it's now plausible to hypothesize that energy only forms into matter when it is being observed. Story 74. That in order for our quantum physics equations to work out, we have to assume that the vacuum has an energy density of 1,113 joules per cubic meter. If we took 1 cubic centimeter of empty space, no atoms necessary, and converted the energy into mass, that tiny little cube would be more massive than the universe by about 40 orders of magnitude. Story 75. According to every TIL, Cleopatra was closer to cutting her hand in Django Unchained than Steve Buscemi was to landing the moon on World Trade Center. Story 76. The most astounding fact is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high-mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy, guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets, and those planets now have the ingredients for life itself, so that when I look up at the night sky, and I know that yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small, and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars. There's a level of connectivity. That's really what you want in life. You want to feel connected. You want to feel relevant. You want to feel like you are a participant in the goings-on of activities and events around you. That's precisely what we are just by being alive. Neil. Story 77. The country that exports the most soy sauce around the world isn't an Asian country. It is the Netherlands. Story 78. That a speck of dust is the halfway point in size between an atom and the Earth. The tininess of atoms is truly mind-boggling. Story 79. Statistically, you have a 6.5 chance of living forever. However, this is based on flawed reasoning that comes from the fact that only 93.5% of people who have ever been alive have already died. Story 80. The Library of Babel has approximately 104,677 books consisting of 3,200 randomly assorted characters. For perspective on how many books that is, there are only about 1,080 atoms in the observable universe. People have found entire pages of known text in this library, such as the first page of Genesis. You can find almost anything up to the 3,200 character limit in this library of randomly assorted characters on their website. Edit. This is digital. That's why there are more books than atoms. Story 81. Toy dinosaurs are made from plastic. Plastic is made from oil. Oil is made from dead dinosaurs. Toy dinosaurs are made from real dinosaurs. Story 82. Kind of a fact, probability-wise, you most likely to spill a drink when walking between your 7th and 10th step due to peak liquid oscillation. Story 83. That pool, like snooker, got its name originally from a game of two Frenchmen throwing rocks at some chickens. Story 84. It's simple, but I think it's one we often overlook and avoid, that we die. One day, I will cease consciousness. It still blows my mind. Story 85. That when told to save fuel, SR-71 Blackbird pilots would speed up because the engines got more efficient the faster the plane flew. Story 86. A trebuchet is far superior to a catapult. Let's see a catapult try to throw a 90-kilogram projectile over 300 meters. Edit. Phone typo. Wonder how far the superior siege engine could throw my phone. Story 87. That the actual quote Vader says in Empire is, "No, I am your father," and not, "Luke, I am your father." Story 88. Mountains are all roughly the same shape, tall and pointy and triangular. Silicate, which is the mineral that most mountains are made of, at an atomic level is roughly the same shape as the mountain it makes. Story 89. If every person in China held hands in a line around the world, a large proportion of them would drown. Story 90. Every year, monarch butterflies migrate south en masse to warmer climates, where they hibernate through the winter. What's mind-boggling is that it takes 4 generations of them to complete this yearly migration, and yet each year, they hibernate on the exact same trees as the year before. Story 91. If the sun exploded, we wouldn't know for 8 minutes. 8 minutes of sunshine from a star that wouldn't exist. Story 92. That what we experience as sensory information is nothing but a fabrication by our brains. We experience a stream of brain activity that is modulated by our senses, but not created. You don't experience your senses. You experience a projection of them by your brain. Story 93. I've said this before in other threads, but more people need to know. The Ottoman Empire was still around when Nintendo was founded. Story 94. You are closer, in time, to seeing a Tyrannosaurus Rex than a Tyrannosaurus Rex was to seeing a Stegosaurus. The Stegosaurus lived 150 million years ago, while the T-Rex lived only 65 million years ago. So you're 65 million years too late to see a T-Rex, but the T-Rex was 85 million years too late to see a Stegosaurus. Story 95. Guy who knows a good bit about ornamental plants here. Lawns are to our fresh water supplies what cows are to methane pollution in climate change. It's the big raging elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, sort of thing. If the southwestern states, Cali, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah, got over their obsession with everyone having a big green lawn, all those states would be cured of their drought problems and have enough excess water to fill dozens of major reservoirs in 3 years. A good rule of thumb is that for the average piece of land a house sits on, about 7,000 to 10,000 square feet, you should have a lawn no bigger than 5,000 square feet. So basically, just your backyard, up to that 5K limit. All those big houses on huge properties with an acre of lawn that has nothing but one tiny trampoline out there. Or old people that mow their lawns to the root, then water every day are the worst offenders and honestly should be fined thousands of dollars for each offense, IMO. Most ornamental grasses and trees that people plant are also incredibly incompatible with the soil and climate, contributing exponentially to the water problem, not just in usage, but also the other big thing no one likes to talk about: excessive fertilization. Even though most fertilizers are environmentally safe on their own, over-fertilization contributes to acidification. Is that a word? It is now, son. Of water sources and growth of harmful algae. These conditions also contribute to the growth of invasive aquatic species, but that's another issue. One good example is Utah Lake south of SLC that over the past couple years became so toxic the water was literally deadly to the touch. Save our water sources and soil. Opt for desert landscaping. If you have a grassy backyard that isn't too big, remember, no bigger than 5,000 square feet. That is probably fine. But no one needs a huge front yard and side yards and a backyard that could easily be mistaken for a park or soccer field. Story 96. That you can control the endocrine system, nervous system, and even fight infections just by breathing deeply. Story 97. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, you are most likely creating a sequence that has never existed before. In fact, if you shuffled a deck of cards once per second since the beginning of the universe, with a guaranteed different sequence each time, you still wouldn't be close to achieving all of them. There are more possible outcomes than atoms in our galaxy. Story 98. That you could probably search this same question on Reddit and find all the same answers in a different thread. Story 99. The fact that we can imagine creating, quote, a brain in a vat, which means taking a brain and hooking it up to a computer to make it believe it is actually in a real-world scenario, means it's possible that any of us might in fact be a brain in a vat. Story 100. The fact that we are literally made from stardust and are just pieces of the universe, observing itself. Story 101. That there are 16 different ways to give a blowjob that will destroy his mind. The 7th one will shock you. Story 102. 14-odd billion years ago, the universe came into being. Innumerable theories have been put forth as to how it happened, but all that is known for sure is that it did. Over the course of the next few billion years, the original element, hydrogen, was attracted to other hydrogen atoms, slowly forming pockets of matter in the nothingness of space that quickly grew in size. Finally, the impact of atoms became so rapid and strong, fusion started to occur, and new elements, such as carbon and oxygen, were synthesized. These new elements bonded with each other, altering their properties in unbelievable ways. After a long enough time, these first stars of matter died, some exploding in massive supernovas that impacted the space surrounding them with the power to destroy anything in the path of the energy, even smaller stars. The stardust that remained reformed into other stars and smaller objects, mostly consisting of solid matter rather than gas, known as planets. One of these planets would one day be dubbed Earth, El Mundo, and many other names. Earth was just far enough from its central star that dihydrogen monoxide, H2O, could form as a liquid. Deep down in the darkest depths of these seas and oceans of dihydrogen monoxide, chemicals started to become arranged in increasingly complex ways. Then something strange happened. These chemicals moved, twisting, turning through their liquid realm. They wriggled in search of the chemicals that would keep them moving. This was the first known example of conscious matter, matter that would knowingly keep itself from harm, and that would strive to continue to do so. This matter, also known as life, slowly developed through changes in the chemicals that instructed it on what to do. Some forms of life floated to the surface, where they began transforming oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen into sugars they could use for energy through a process called photosynthesis. Some life forms, including these, started to split in half as they grew, forming long chains or many separate life forms that continued to do as their parents had done. Through this system, the reproduction of life, almost all life became connected in some way via a common ancestor. Eventually, many types of life would stick together, providing protection from other life forms that wanted to steal their chemicals, or making themselves more adept at taking chemicals from others. This arms race led to an extremely rapid evolution of life forms that continued for billions of years. One day, An organism, or group of life forms, cells, started assigning different jobs to different cells within itself. Some would help move the organism, some would help in battle, and some would be in charge of reproduction. This accelerated the arms race exponentially till organisms began to be measured in feet rather than millimeters or decameters. This was also when life forms began to reproduce with each other, forming new creations with even more alterations. By this time, many organisms had made it onto the solid land, and the arms race had begun anew. The organisms that photosynthesized became plants, and the ones that preyed on other organisms were animals. Animals developed structures to move about on land and excelled in their new environment, developing all new adaptations, such as a tough, dry skin and lungs to help them survive. Animals and plants both became gradually larger and more complex, but every time they peaked in diversity and power, a force from within or without the earth would return them to the minuscule life forms they had started out as. First, a massive volcanic eruption that separated whole continents, followed by a hail of enormous meteors that blotted out the sun. Yet life still prevailed. This inspiring story continued until a few bare million years in the past, when a new genus of animal arose. Until that point, animals had simply lived within their environment, but this animal changed it intentionally. Using simple tools fashioned from rock, stone, and bone, this animal went from a delicacy in the eyes of predators to the most dangerous creature ever known. As it evolved, it would take on many forms, but eventually only one remained. Not the fastest, nor the strongest, but the wisest of all. It slowly moved from the simple tools of its ancestors, creating weapons of mass destruction and works of unparalleled beauty until finally, it created something that had never before existed on the history of the universe: the ability to end all life. The ability to end the world, but at the same time leave it behind in search of a new home. This being, with the power to annihilate in one hand, offered with the other salvation for all beings, for their way of life would not last forever. Eventually, their star would lose power, and when that happened, Earth would be caught up in the wake of its destruction. But that is far in the future. So far, in fact, it may never happen at all. For this creature also holds the power to destroy itself, which it has tried to do already many times over. So now I ask you, being of passing in life, what is your future? Will you be the light in the darkness, or the whisper of air that snuffs it out? Story 103. Don't know if somebody has said it already. Without their individual smells, apples, potatoes, and onions taste the same. Story 104. Up until this point, no one could prove that everything around you is not a figment of your imagination. Everything you experience is inside your brain, and your brain only. Story 105. There are 200 billion stars in our galaxy. It's a smallish galaxy. There are trillions of galaxies that we know of currently. There are planets made of diamond. There are planets where it rains glass sideways. There are people still eliminate each other in 2017 because of whose imaginary friend is better. Story 106. S5001481. The largest black hole ever discovered. Its diameter is the distance of our sun to Pluto, 47 times, which is at least 236.7 billion kilometers. I have a small existential crisis every time I think about it. We are so meaningless. Why does physics allow that to happen? I'm going to go lie down. Story 107. Everyone knows photosynthesis, but everyone doesn't really realize that the bulk of the tree, the wood, carbon, comes from the air and not the ground. Wood is made from air. Story 108. All planets in our solar system are able to fit in between the Earth and the Moon. Here is what that would look like. Story 109. Take a minute on a busy street. Every car has at least one person, if not 2 or 3 or more. Every person who walks past or rides their bike, each and every one of them has a life that is as busy and complex as your own. Not only that, but what you are seeing is a mere fraction of the total population. There are over 7 billion people who all have similarly complex lives, all playing out at the same time. All of this is taking place on a single planet. Story 110. My coworker calls it mind-boggling, also called migraines, mind cranes. He's not our brightest bulb. Story 111. John Malkovich made a film none of us will ever get to watch called 100 Years, the movie you will never see. After being made, it was locked in a safe. The safe was specially designed to be impenetrable until it automatically opens in 2115, after we all have died. Story 112. Computers are really, really stupid. Look in the mirror, then realize that computers are even dumber than that. If you tell a computer, walk forward, it will, once you teach it how to walk, move forward and never stop. Eventually it will hit a wall, try to cross a freeway, walk off a cliff, walk into the ocean, or maybe a volcano. It will never stop and never avoid obstacles because you didn't tell it to. That's why programmers are in such high demand. Story 113. Spoiler alert, that when people pull off their thumb and put it back on, it is just a trick. Still hurts my head to think about. Story 114. It's a proven fact that the Unabomber was a failed attempt by the CIA to make a mind-controlled super soldier. Source, Story 115. The hottest temperature ever recorded in the known universe and the coldest temperature ever recorded in the known universe both occurred on Earth. Story 116. A pizza that has radius z and height a has volume pi zza, because the area of a circle is pi multiplied by the radius squared, which can be written out as pi zz. Then you multiply by the height to get the total volume. Story 117. Rye as we know it today was just a shoot plant substance that grew on barley and wheat fields, but eventually, through selective breeding, became a viable crop in its own right. Basically, it was just a bit of grass that tried its hardest to fit in, and now it's a harvestable crop. Story 118. Not too long ago, we pointed a powerful telescope into the darkest region of space that we could find. The scientists assumed they would see nothing but dark, empty space. Instead, they saw this. Story 119. Prior to the first true chicken, there were non-chickens. The DNA changes came about in cells housed in the egg, so the egg came first. Story 120. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minus 112. Yep, if you sum all the natural numbers, you don't get infinity, you get minus 1/12. Here's the explanation. Story 121. That in 1998, The Undertaker threw mankind off Hell in a Cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. Story 122. I have a friend who works at Disney. We played Warcraft together, and he played a paladin named Naveen. When they were working on Princess and the Frog, they needed a name for the prince. He got them to name him Naveen after his paladin's name. Story 123. There are more stars in the universe than there is sand in all the beaches on Earth. Imagine scooping a handful of sand. You must be holding several thousand grains, but that's a drop in the bucket of the sand on the ground around you. Now imagine there has to be at least one planet orbiting a star. How can some people be sure we are alone in the universe? Story 124. If you take a deck of playing cards and shuffle them well, then the exact order that the cards is in is overwhelmingly likely to have never happened in history, anywhere. To give you an idea of how many that is, here is how long it would take to go through every possible permutation of cards. If every star in Hawaii had 1 trillion planets, each with 1 trillion people living on them, and each of these people has 1 trillion packs of cards, and somehow they managed to make unique shuffles 1,000 times per second, and they'd been doing that since the Big Bang. They'd only just now be starting to repeat shuffles. Story 125. 1. Not only are there 140,000x more stars in the universe, 1 septillion total, then there are individual grains of sand on all the beaches of Earth, 7 quintillion. But stars make up only 0.4 of the estimated total mass energy of the universe. Also, there are allegedly 5 sextillion atoms in a drop of water. 2. The human body is a torus, aka donut shape, aka there is a hole running from mouth to anus, courtesy of a gastroenterologist. Story 126. When spiders detect danger, they bite off one of their legs and use it as bait for the oncoming predator. Their regeneration process is roughly 5-7 days. Story 127. There was a man who survived both of the atomic bombs dropped against Japan at the end of World War II. He was in Hiroshima for work when the first bomb exploded and managed to make it back to Nagasaki, his hometown, just in time for the second bombing. He endured both explosions and the radiation sickness that followed, and eventually died in 2010 at the age of 93. Story 128. Buffalo, 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 buffalo. This is a grammatically correct sentence. Story 129. I have a little-known fact that no one believes. I live in New Zealand, and the moon appears to be upside down compared to the Northern Hemisphere vantage point. Story 130. That Theodore Roosevelt was shot in the chest while giving a speech, showed everyone where he was shot, then continued on with his speech for over an hour. Story 131. Literally spent an hour and a half reading through this thread. Good work, Reddit brothers and sisters. Story 132. Whale song, particularly that of humpback whales, follows the rules of music theory, containing rhythm, tempo, melody, harmony, key. The songs sung by adult whales can take days to sing, are used as mating calls. This song can take years to evolve, compose. So when you swim with a whale, the sounds vibrating through the water hitting your eardrums is a love song that has taken anywhere from 20 to 100 years to write, evolves with each performance. Story 133. A female octopus will eliminate the male after mating. After birth, the female octopus dies. All octopi are orphans. Story 134. There is 2 meters of DNA in every cell in your body. It manages to get so small by coiling up. Source, biology student. Story 135. The brain is the only thing in the history of time to truly name itself. We. Story 136. Hubble Deep Field. Hold a dime at arm's length. The Hubble Deep Field is a spot in the sky that is the equivalent size of FDR's eye on that coin. Every point of light in that image is a galaxy with hundreds of billions of stars. The Earth is insignificant. The solar system is insignificant. The Milky Way is insignificant. Space is unending. Story 137. That honey boo-boo exists as proof that someone willingly fudged her mother. Sends chills down my spine every fudge time I think about it. Story 138. We actually never touch anything, but we feel the vibrations between surfaces. There is, on a molecular level, space between your jerk and your chair. You're hovering over everything. Story 139. Chronologically, Cleopatra lived closer to the invention of the iPhone than she did the building of the pyramids. Story 140. That in 1998, The Undertaker threw mankind from hell in the cell, and he plummeted 16 feet and broke through the announcer's table. Story 141. What we consider free will is, regardless of whether you believe in it or not, completely irrelevant. Many see life as infinite possibilities, but the truth is that our decisions are actually determined by our surroundings. Existence is actually a huge chain reaction, and our every move was destined from the moment the universe came to be, solely because we react to our environment. A man does not act irrationally. His actions are, in his mind, completely rational. He acts because of what he knows. He knows what he knows because of the life he lead. The life he lead was the result of countless other beings and natural phenomena intertwined together. We are all but cogs in the great machine that is existence. Story 142. Space-time theoretically allows strange topologies that can loop back on itself. We theoretically can have infinite loops. Also considering the fact that almost everything we understand we see comes from our understanding and piecing together of the world. I don't put it past Kant that space-time could be a creation of our own minds. Story 143. If you took all of the world's water and put it into cups, the number of molecules in one cup would be greater than the number of cups holding water. Story 144. The moon was formed when a Mars-sized planet collided with early Earth, destroying it completely, merging cores, and ejecting a ring of material which later coalesced into the moon. At that time, the new moon was magma, and 15 times closer than its current position, a giant fireball in the sky. We will never know what Earth MKY was like, since it was destroyed in the collision. This is Earth MK2. Story 145. If you were to lay the Siberian Railway out across the U.S., you could go from Los Angeles to New York, back again to Los Angeles, and travel 13 of the way back to New York. Siberian Railway, 5,800 miles. L.A. to N.Y., 2,500 miles. Or if you made the last half a bridge, you could ride from LA to Galway, Ireland. Story 146. Quantum particles have no defined position, but rather exist in a distribution of possible positions. It's only when we try to measure the position that the particle is in that it takes a defined position. Story 147. If you were born on or before February 20, 1993, you were born closer to Neil Armstrong walking on the moon than you were today. Story 148. If we could build a spaceship that could go 150,000 miles per hour, it would still take 18,000 years just to reach the nearest star. Story 149, that Valery Spiridonov, a 31-year-old man who suffers from Verdnig-Hoffmans, has volunteered to partake in the world's first head transplant, which will take place as early as December of 2017. We live in an insane era. Story 150. When people die, their blood and all other bodily fluids get flushed right into the sewer system. I'm an embalmer. Story 151. If you take all the water of our Lake Superior, you can cover both North and South America with a foot of water. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.